I was 9 years old when it happened. Old enough to understand fear, but too young to know how to deal with it. My mother had left me home alone for the evening. She said she'd only be gone for an hour. I remember standing by the front door as she locked it from the outside, telling me not to open it for anyone, no matter what. I nodded like I always did. At that age, an hour felt short, almost exciting. The house was familiar. I had lived there my whole life. Every room, every hallway, every sound it made at night, I thought I knew all of it. The living room light was on. The TV was playing cartoons softly, and the rest of the house was dark. I liked it that way. Darkness didn't scare me as much when I knew where it was. I sat cross-legged on the carpet, eating cereal straight from the box, glancing at the clock every few minutes. The ticking felt louder than usual. Each second seemed to drag. About 20 minutes after my mother left, the house made a noise. At first, it was subtle, a long, slow creak coming from upstairs. The kind of sound you might ignore if you weren't alone, the kind adults dismiss without thinking. But I froze immediately. The sound wasn't random. It came from a specific place. The upstairs hallway. I lowered the TV volume, listening carefully. The house fell quiet, and that's when I noticed how empty it felt. No traffic noise outside, no neighbors, just the hum of the refrigerator and my own breathing. I told myself it was nothing. Houses make noises. I had heard that 100 times before. Then I heard it again. This time it sounded closer, like something shifting its weight. My stomach tightened. I stood up slowly, every movement deliberate, as if sudden motion might make something worse. I walked to the bottom of the staircase and stared up into the darkness. The upstairs light hallway was off. It looked deeper than usual, like the darkness had thickness to it. "Mom?" I called out. My voice echoed back at me, weak and thin. No answer. I waited, listening. Seconds passed, then minutes. Just as I started to relax, I heard something that made my chest feel hollow. A dragging sound. Soft, careful, like bare feet sliding across carpet. It came from upstairs. I backed away from the stairs, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I muted the TV completely now. The silence pressed in around me, heavy and uncomfortable, like the house was holding its breath. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was the air vent. Maybe a pet got in somehow. Maybe I was imagining things. Then, a shadow moved. I saw it clearly. A shape passed slowly across the upstairs bathroom doorway, blocking out the faint glow from a streetlight outside. It wasn't fast, like a trick of the eye. It moved with purpose. I remember gripping the wall to keep from falling over. My legs felt weak, shaky, like they might give out at any moment. I wanted to scream, but something inside me told me not to. It felt like screaming would let it know exactly where I was. I grabbed the cordless phone from the side table and held it tight against my chest. I didn't dial anyone. I just held it there like it was something solid, something real. That's when I heard my name. It came from upstairs. Quiet, calm. "Come here."
It sounded like my mother. Every part of my body reacted at once. My skin prickled, my stomach dropped, and my heart raced. The voice was right, but the way it said my name wasn't. It lingered too long on the last syllable, like someone copying how she spoke without fully understanding it. I whispered, "No." The house answered me. A door upstairs opened. The sound was slow and deliberate, the hinges whining as if they hadn't been used in years. Each second stretched painfully long. I slid down the wall and curled into myself, pressing my hands over my mouth to keep from crying. Then, I heard footsteps. They weren't rushed. One step, pause. Another step, pause. They stopped halfway down the stairs. I could see the staircase from where I sat. I couldn't see anything moving, but I knew something was there. I could feel it, like being watched without seeing the eyes. The footsteps resumed, faster now. The voice spoke again, closer this time. You shouldn't be hiding. I don't remember making the decision to move. My body acted on its own. I crawled toward the front door, keeping as low as I could, terrified that even the sound of my breathing might give me away. Behind me, the footsteps picked up speed, not running, hunting. I reached the door and turned the lock with shaking hands. Just as I pulled it open, something slammed into the wall behind me. The sound was loud, violent, close enough that I felt the vibration through the floor. I ran, barefoot, crying, not looking back. I don't remember crossing the yard or knocking on the neighbor's door. I only remember collapsing on their porch, sobbing uncontrollably. They found me shaking and terrified, unable to explain what had happened. When my mother came home later, the house was silent. Too silent. Nothing was out of place. No doors open, no signs of anyone being there. She told me it was a nightmare. She said I must have scared myself. That night, she tucked me into bed like nothing had happened. But as she turned to leave the room, she stopped in the doorway. Her voice changed. She asked me why the upstairs hallway light was on. I felt cold all over. I never told her, because I knew something she didn't. Whatever was in the house that night didn't disappear. It learned. And sometimes, even now, when I'm alone and the house goes quiet, I hear footsteps that stop when I stop breathing. I was 11 years old when this happened. My parents trusted me enough to leave me alone after school. It was supposed to be routine. I'd come home, lock the door, do my homework, and wait for them to return around sunset. That day felt no different at first. I remember throwing my backpack on the floor and heading straight to the kitchen. The house was empty, but not in a way that felt strange. The familiar hum of appliances filled the silence. The afternoon light poured in through the windows, making everything look normal, safe. I locked the front door like I always did and checked the windows. It was a habit my father drilled into me. Everything was secure. I went to my room and started my homework, but something felt off. Not wrong, just quiet. Too quiet. Even the ticking clock on my wall seemed muted, like the sound was being swallowed. About half an hour later, I heard the first noise. It was a soft click. I thought it came from the kitchen. At first, I ignored it. Houses make sounds. I'd been home alone plenty of times before. But then it happened again, louder this time. Click. I paused, pen hovering over the paper. The sound didn't repeat immediately, but the feeling it left behind didn't go away. It felt deliberate, like a signal. I stood up and walked into the hallway, listening carefully. Everything looked normal. No doors open, no lights on that I hadn't turned on myself. I went to the kitchen. That's when I noticed the back door. It was unlocked. My heart skipped. I knew for a fact I had locked it. I remembered turning the knob, checking it twice. I stood there staring at it, trying to convince myself I was mistaken. Slowly, I locked it again. As I turned away, I heard something that made my stomach tighten. A soft exhale, right behind me. I spun around, my heart pounding, but the kitchen was empty. I scanned every corner, every shadow. Nothing. No movement. No sign that anyone had been there. I laughed nervously at myself. I told myself it was my imagination. Fear does that when you're alone too long. I went back to my room and shut the door. That's when the knocking started. 3 slow knocks. Not loud, not aggressive, just enough to be heard. I froze, staring at my bedroom door. The knocking didn't come from the front door. It came from inside the house, from the hallway. I didn't answer. A few seconds passed, then 3 more knocks. My chest felt tight, like it was hard to breathe. I slid off my bed and crouched near the door, listening. I could hear faint movement on the other side, the sound of something shifting its weight. Then a voice spoke. It was soft, calm. "Hey, open the door." Something about the way it said that made my skin crawl. The tone was flat, emotionless, like it had learned what to say, but not how to say it. I stayed silent. The voice tried again. "Come on, I know you're in there." My heart was racing now. I backed away from the door, shaking. I didn't understand how someone could know where I was without seeing me. Then I heard it. Footsteps, moving away from my door. Relief washed over me for a brief second, until the footsteps stopped, right outside my parents' bedroom. I listened as a door opened. Slowly. The sound of it scraping across the floor made my stomach churn. That door hadn't been opened all day. Then came the sound of drawers. Someone was searching. I grabbed my phone and tried calling my mom. No answer. I tried my dad, straight to voicemail. The footsteps started again. This time they were heavier, slower, purposeful. They stopped outside my room. The doorknob began to turn, just a little, back and forth, testing it. The voice spoke again, right outside the door. "You locked it." I felt tears running down my face. I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing. The knob stopped moving, but I could feel something on the other side, waiting. Then, without warning, the footsteps rushed away down the hallway. I heard the back door slam open. I stayed in my room for what felt like hours. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. When my parents finally came home, I ran to them, hysterical. They searched the house. Nothing was missing. Nothing was broken. They told me I must have imagined it. That night, my brother came home late. He asked why I kept locking my door whenever he walked past it. I asked him what he meant. He said, "I heard you lock it earlier, when I got home." I told him I had been in my room the whole time. He went quiet. He told me he didn't get home until after our parents. Then he asked me something I still think about. He asked why I answered him from behind the door when he hadn't said anything yet. I was 10 years old, and I remember that day clearly because it was the first time my parents trusted me to stay home completely alone at night. Not after school, not for an hour in the afternoon. This time, it was dark outside when they left. They said they'd be back before midnight. I watched their car pull out of the driveway through the living room window, the red tail lights fading into the distance. When they were gone, the house felt larger than it ever had before. Every room seemed farther apart, every hallway longer. I locked the front door, then I locked it again. I turned on most of the lights even though my parents hated when I did that. Darkness didn't bother me as much when I could see it clearly. I made myself dinner, turned on the TV, and sat on the couch, trying to enjoy the freedom. For a while, it worked. The TV noise filled the room, the clock ticked steadily. Everything felt normal. Then, sometime after 10, the power went out. The TV shut off mid-sentence. The lights died instantly. The house dropped into darkness so sudden and complete that it felt like being submerged underwater. For a moment, I just sat there, frozen, my ears ringing from the silence. Then the backup power kicked in. Not the lights, just the hallway nightlight near the stairs.
a small, dull orange glow. I told myself it was fine. Power outages happen sometimes. My parents would be back soon. I grabbed my phone and checked for signal. 1 bar. I stayed on the couch, staring at the darkened hallway. The light didn't reach very far. It barely touched the bottom of the stairs before fading into shadow. That's when I heard it. A faint thump. It came from upstairs. I held my breath and listened. Another sound followed, a soft shuffle, like something being dragged slowly across the floor. I tried calling out, "Hello?" My voice sounded wrong in the dark, too loud, too fragile. No answer. I told myself it was the house settling, or maybe something fell over. I tried to focus on my phone, scrolling mindlessly, pretending I didn't hear anything. Then the upstairs hallway light turned on. I hadn't touched the switch. The pale light spilled over the railing, illuminating the top of the stairs. My stomach tightened. I stared at it, waiting for it to turn off again. It didn't. I stood up slowly, every muscle tense. "Mom?" I called. Silence.
I took a few steps toward the stairs, then stopped. Something about the way the light looked felt wrong. Too steady, too deliberate. From upstairs, a voice called down, "Why are you standing there?" It sounded like my father. My heart jumped. Relief washed over me so fast it almost made me dizzy. I answered without thinking, "I thought you weren't back yet." There was a pause. Then the voice replied, "I came back for something." I frowned. My parents never did that. They always called first. "What did you forget?" I asked. Another pause, longer this time. Then, softly, "You." Every hair on my arms stood up. I didn't answer. The light upstairs flickered once. I backed away from the stairs, my pulse pounding in my ears. "That's not funny," I said, my voice shaking. The voice didn't respond. Instead, I heard footsteps, slow, heavy, coming toward the stairs. Each step creaked loudly, echoing through the house. I watched in horror as a shadow stretched along the wall, growing larger as it moved closer to the top step. I ran. I locked myself in my parents' bedroom and pushed the dresser against the door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial my phone. No signal. The footsteps stopped outside the bedroom. The handle rattled gently, not forcefully, testing. Then came the knocking, slow, careful. "Open the door," the voice said. It sounded closer now, more distorted, like it was coming through something. I stayed silent, pressing my hands over my mouth to keep from crying. The knocking continued for a long time, minutes, maybe longer. I lost track of time. Eventually, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. I waited, listening. I could hear faint movement again. This time, it sounded like something crawling. The sound circled the room slowly, stopping just outside the door. Then, the voice whispered through the crack, "You shouldn't lock people out." I squeezed my eyes shut. Something scraped along the door, slowly from top to bottom, like fingers dragging across wood. Then, suddenly, everything went quiet. No footsteps, no breathing, nothing. I stayed there until I heard the front door open and real voices calling my name. When my parents finally found me, I was shaking uncontrollably. They told me the power outage affected the whole neighborhood. They said the hallway light must have turned on when the electricity flickered. They said I imagined the rest. But later that night, after the lights were back on and I was tucked into bed, my father came into my room with a confused look on his face. He asked why the upstairs hallway switch was broken. He said it was stuck in the on position. It hadn't been touched in years. I didn't tell him about the voice. I didn't tell him about the footsteps, because I knew something important. Whatever came back into the house that night
came back before my parents did. And sometimes, when the power goes out, I still hear it asking why I'm standing there.
If you were still listening, then these tapes did what they were meant to do. The people in these stories were just children. They didn't understand what was happening to them. They only knew one thing. Something changed the moment they were left alone. And even now, years later, that feeling hasn't fully gone away. Houses don't forget. Silence doesn't mean safety. And being alone doesn't always mean you're the only one there. What makes these tapes disturbing isn't the fear in the moment, it's the way it follows you afterward. The way every quiet house starts to feel different. The way every unfamiliar sound makes you stop and listen. Maybe these were just childhood imaginations, or maybe children notice things adults choose to ignore. That's for you to decide. If you heard something while listening, a sound behind you, a shift in the room, a moment where the silence felt too heavy, don't panic. Just remember that these tapes are only recordings, or at least that's what they're supposed to be. This has been The Lost Tapes, and if you choose to come back for the next one, listen carefully. Some tapes don't end when the audio stops. Good night.